light within my heart, light within my thoughts, light within my words. May one and all and everything, blessed and loved, ever be. Welcome. I am Sister Who. I was asked to say a few words about intelligence and self-worth. And it's a complicated subject. It sounds so simple to say, but it's complicated in that there are so many different ways that people perceive it. The first thing, I guess, is to figure out what we mean by intelligence. There is, well, everyone likes to talk about what's your IQ, your intelligent quotient. What that test actually measures is people's ability to figure out problems, the ability to think, the ability to look at something and interpret it. It's not so much a question of how much you've memorized or how many complicated things you can do, but how much or at what level your brain actually works. That when you see a problem, how long does it take you to figure out what's going on? The challenge of that to societal conversations is that when people talk about someone as being unintelligent, they're not really referring to intelligence at all. What they're referring to is a particular action, that they did something and something bad happened, so they must be unintelligent. No, that's really not what intelligence is about. It was someone who saw an opportunity or something to respond to, a challenge to work with, and they chose a certain response that proved to be ineffective or proved to be effective to some degree. And in being labeled by the other person as being unintelligent, it's like an attack on their self-worth, but the thing to bear in mind is that it really only reflects what the speaker is perceiving, not what the intelligence of the person being observed actually is. If someone says, well, for example, when I was in college, I went to a church college, a college that was owned by a Protestant denomination, which I didn't really think anything of it one way or another. To me, it was a college, and they had different quirks and things that reflected the particular Protestant denomination, but it really wasn't a major factor to me that it was owned by a particular denomination. But I noticed, because of it being a church college, one of the requirements at that college was that everyone had to attend at least I think it was one, it might have been as many as 3, but I think it was one chapel service a week, which was essentially this presentation where the college would bring in someone to give a lecture on some allegedly spiritual or religious topic, and everyone would listen and, in a respectful, mature, academic, grown-up sort of way, supposedly. I say supposedly because it was amusing to watch as people came out of the chapel service afterwards. Those who agreed with whatever the speaker said would come out every time saying, "Wow, what a good speaker." And those who disagreed with the opinion of the speaker would come out inevitably saying, "What a bad speaker. He had no intelligence. He wasn't prepared. He whatever, whatever, whatever." And it really wasn't about whether or not the person was a good speaker, whether or not they used their notes, whether or not they dressed appropriately or looked professional or what their degrees were. It was about nothing more than whether or not the person who was criticizing the speaker or hopefully critiquing the speaker agreed with the point or the opinion that the speaker was trying to make. If the speaker was advancing an opinion that the person didn't like, well, then they were bad. But it wasn't an evaluation of speaking ability. It wasn't an evaluation of intelligence. And so what the person criticizing the speaker was revealing was not whether or not the speaker was good, or whether or not the choice was intelligent, or the topic was relevant, or anything. What they were revealing to everyone around them was their own orientation to that subject. That they were a person who, I don't know, just to pick something totally weird that they never did, if the presentation was about organ donation, which I don't think they ever did a presentation on that during the 4 years I was in college, but if someone agreed with everyone should sign the organ donation card so that if they're killed in an accident, their organs can be used to help other people, and someone else says, oh no, they shouldn't, people need to deal with their mortality and accept death when it comes instead of cannibalizing parts from other people's bodies in order to prolong life that much longer, because these bodies are not designed to be immortal anyway. And I'm not meaning to bias this topic one way or the other, and I apologize if the terminology I use offended anyone. It's simply different ways of looking at it. And that's a much more complicated subject to get into another time, I suppose. But the point being, coming back to these chapel services, that if someone believed in organ donation and the speaker advocated organ donation, then, oh, that was a good speaker. But all that really tells you is that the person doing the critique believes in organ donation. It doesn't really tell you whether the speaker was a good speaker or not. He might have been grammatically and in terms of vocabulary might have been pathetic in terms of projecting his voice and enunciating his words. He may have been horrible. He may have been unprepared and dropped his notes in the middle. Somehow all that mattered to the person doing the critique is whether or not they agreed. I have said in the past, and I think it remains true, that one of the most important freedoms we have is the freedom to disagree. But the thing that comes into that a lot of people overlook is when it's the freedom to disagree, but holding ourselves accountable so that when we disagree, we know why we disagreed, and we know upon what we base that. And if it doesn't feel right, we can still say it doesn't feel right to me, but I'm not sure why I have an objection to this. It just, something feels wrong about it. I think I need to do more study. I need to figure out why I'm having a negative reaction to this. Coming back to this point of self-worth and intelligence, though, self-worth, ideally, or I suppose from a common sense perspective, is inherent. People have worth simply because they are living people, not because they're intelligent or not intelligent, because they're rich or poor or whatever they are. Every life has value. Every life has value because there are so many even miraculous things that can come from that life. Every life is a package of infinite possibility. Even the person who doesn't make good choices today, or who may not have learned that much, who may not have learned how to think. Thinking is a skill that is not inherent. It's something we learn as we go through life. We learn how to ask questions. We learn how to deconstruct topics and to say, well, that's a car, okay, and what is a car? Well, a car has 4 wheels and an engine and a place for passengers, and we begin to deconstruct the car into all of its pieces so that we understand in a more holistic sense what a car is. You're not born knowing that. You're not born being intelligent. This is stuff that we acquire by reading and learning and talking to others and considering every experience and person we meet, everything that ever happens to us, as an opportunity to learn something. Of all the theological conclusions I've wrestled with in my life, the one that seems to hold up to all the questioning and scrutiny and deconstruction I can throw at it is that life is primarily concerned with the growth of the soul. That whether we have an easy, peaceful, pleasant, enjoyable life, or whether we have a life of unending suffering, that what matters more than whether it felt good or didn't is what we learned by it. That being said, when someone is in the midst of suffering is not the time to ask, what can we learn from this? The learning happens in retrospect, not at the time. When you're struggling with a problem and it hurts, the highest priority is getting yourself to a safe place and making the pain stop. Having done that, however, it's not something that just needs to be forgotten. Oh, just put it behind you and don't think about it. There were things that happened there that revealed the truth of your soul, that revealed the truth of your opinions, that revealed the truth of your beliefs. That if you truly believe, for example, if Christians truly believe that they were going to a better place when they died, I don't think any of them would be pushing for organ donation or prolonging life in any sense of the word. Because it makes no sense. If you're truly going to a better place when you die, well, then go. It's going to be better. Why wouldn't you want to go to a better place? Does that mean they don't believe? I guess to some extent it does. But it's not the only thing they believe. And I guess I describe myself as an eclectic mystic. So am I Christian? Well, yes, and more than that too. Am I pagan? Well, in some ways, and more than that too. I'm a spiritual person. I'm a person who relates to the divine in whatever form the divine chooses to manifest. When it comes back to this issue of intelligence and self-worth, though, there are people who disagree with me who, because of what I've just said, would assume that I'm not intelligent. And I would say, well, maybe I am and maybe I'm not. My self-worth doesn't depend upon your approval or your opinion of me. My self-worth comes from all of the infinite possibilities that I carry for learning, for contributing to a situation, for problem solving, for helping those in need, for doing what only I can do in this world. And if you can't see what my contribution is or what I can do in this world or how I can be helpful to you, then that has more to do with your perception than it has to do with my ability. When somebody says, you're not intelligent, therefore you have no worth, I suppose the most blunt and frank and honest answer I could offer is, well, thank you for your opinion. Obviously, I disagree with it. And I don't intend to base any of my choices upon that opinion that you just gave me. But your opinion may keep us from being collaborators because you won't open your life to the possibilities of my contribution. And you will never be more than you would be without me. The marvelous thing about community is that we get all of our intelligence together and all of our self-worth together, and we can accomplish more than any one of us can accomplish all on our own. What our opinions of intelligence and self-worth affect is not the actual intelligence and self-worth that is present. They affect the relationships and the collaboration that can follow. To the extent that we believe somebody is intelligent, in general, people listen more, and they pay attention, and they carefully consider what this person has said. And in some cases, they know the person is wrong, that they arrived at a conclusion that doesn't hold up to scrutiny. At the same time, that is not the only thing the person communicated. That this person who is presenting themselves as intelligent may have come to a wrong conclusion, but they may have demonstrated the willingness to engage in dialogue, the willingness to look at a particular matter from multiple perspectives, and they may have offered a completely new way of looking at something that, even though they arrived at a wrong conclusion, according to some criteria or another, that method may be applicable to something else. That as much as you disagree with their conclusion, you might take the method. The metaphor that comes to mind would be disagreeing with the way someone drives a car, that maybe they're driving too aggressively and not looking where they're going enough, not checking their blind spot before they change lanes, all sorts of things like that. It doesn't make the car bad. It says that the car should be operated in a more safe manner, but it doesn't make the car bad. When we wrestle with ideas, and especially theological ideas, what is God like? How many different answers are there to that question? When we wrestle with those sorts of questions, when we grow to understand what it means to measure something by different criteria, how far is it from here to there? Well, if I measure in inches, it's a long ways because it's a really big number. If I measure in feet, it may not be very far at all. If I measure in yards, it may only be 1 or 2. By changing the criteria, the unit of measure, we change the outcome, and in a sense we change our relationship to it. If we say that is 350,000 units away, how many people are going to want to step back and say, well, then why even try? Well, the unit of measurement I was using was millimeters. 350,000 millimeters is not really that far to travel. But you have to look at what unit of measure you're using to describe something. And so when we look at intelligence, if you want me to do bookkeeping, I am not very intelligent. Bookkeeping and business management are not where my skills lie. But if you want me to do something creative and talk about symbols and metaphors instead, I may be able to talk for quite a long time without stopping. Some people think that's wonderful. Some people get tired of it after a certain point. And I invite them to listen as long as they want and then change the channel or walk away or whatever it is they need to do. I'm here to give whatever good I can. And I guess for the person who has been told they're unintelligent and it has negatively impacted their self-worth, a question I would throw out is, why does that person's opinion matter to you? If they said you had green hair and you didn't have green hair, granting that there are some people who have colors added to there and they do have green hair. And I've actually seen some of them that looks very beautiful. That aside, what I was trying to say is that if they say something about you that isn't true, you have no doubt it isn't true. You have, you have snakes in your hair, like the Hydra of Greek mythology, or you have 4 arms and you only have 2. Well, you'd question whether something was wrong with their vision, whether they were being delusional, whether they were hallucinating something. You wouldn't stand there going, I do not, that isn't true, getting all defensive and worried and frightened about it because it's not true. And there's no reason to treat it as if it were true. You just know that they may be very sincere and they may be seeing it, but whatever they're seeing is not three-dimensional reality as we know it. So then that gives you the choice of, okay, do I call a doctor or what do I do here? I guess it depends on what they said and how severe it is and so forth. But the point, coming back to self-worth and intelligence, that when somebody says you are not intelligent, why do you treat it with any more respect than if they said you were born on Mars and you weren't? Why does their opinion matter to you? And in some cases there is a reason. Well, they're my boss. They're in charge of whether or not I get my paycheck. They're my teacher. They're in charge of whether or not I get a passing grade in this class. They're my friend that I meet with every week, and I would really like to continue being friends with them. And it's not that I need them to approve of me, but I need them to want to be with me. And I guess that would lead to the next step of, well, what's in that need? Deconstructing one more level down. And, well, why do I need this person? I believe relationships are essential, and it's good that they be symbiotic and healthy relationships. If they're toxic relationships, it makes sense to let them go and go find some new friends. That being said, even with your best friends, there are going to be arguments and there are going to be disagreements. To see their contribution to your life and to recognize that even in disagreement, how each of you still values, in a sense, loving and being with each other. That you remain committed friends, and that you accept that he believes in doing it this way and I believe in doing it that way. And we have to agree that if we do a shared activity, we're each going to come up with a way of doing it that allows each of us to do what's appropriate to ourselves. If we decide we're going on a camping trip, he wants to sleep in a tent, I want to sleep in an RV, well, we find a campground where we can do both, so that each person is able to get their needs met in whatever way is most effective for them. Each person bringing whatever intelligence they have to the activity that is being shared, the adventure that is being attempted. Where self-worth figures into this is that the more we believe in ourselves as valuable persons, the more things we're willing to try. And the more we believe in our own intelligence, the more we look at things and plan ahead and figure out whether we have the resources to meet all of the demands that that circumstance is likely to include. The real measure of intelligence, I guess, comes down to the extent to which we apply ourselves, to the extent to which we do the work of thinking. To look at something, to figure out what all the pieces are, how those pieces work, what are the relationships between the pieces, and because of that, how I need to come prepared. That I need to have a certain amount of food, that I need to have fuel for the camp cook stove, that I need to have batteries for the flashlight. These are all the sorts of ways that we demonstrate intelligence, and it's not about orchestrating our life according to somebody else's opinion of our intelligence, but it's about having our intelligence, using our intelligence, and further developing our intelligence. That by reading, by learning new languages, by researching how do things work, that we can move beyond whatever level of intelligence we have. If someone says, well, you're not very intelligent, to instead of worrying about whether it's true or whether it's not, to simply say, well, where do you think I could learn what I need to know? And put the focus back on them. And if they say, well, I don't know, well, maybe you're not any more intelligent than I am then. Because if you knew how to do this, and I say, where could I learn what I don't know? And you say, I don't know, well, then you don't know either, so at least you're no more intelligent than I am. And if you do know, then why don't you tell me how you think it should be done? And if I find anything amiss with it, I'll simply ask, well, and why do you think that? And, well, what would you do if it wasn't quite like that? If this one little piece was missing, what would you do? And that person may be the source of information you need to be better equipped for your next challenge. Even our enemies, our opponents in arguments, those we consider the least likely person on earth, may have things to teach us if we're willing to genuinely listen and be present. But to do that, we have to believe, at least in our own self-worth, that what they said at least has a possibility of not being true. And we really don't know whether it's true or to what extent it's true unless we keep asking questions and keep moving forward and keep investigating how much can we put our intelligence and our abilities together and solve this problem, whatever the particular problem is, whether it's building a house or finding your way around town, whether it's learning a foreign language or figuring out what the homework assignment for next week is. we may disagree. We may disagree on who's the intelligent one and who's not. We may disagree on who's the valuable one and who's not. To me, a person is a person is a person. Every person has value and merit. But I think people make themselves less valuable, and in a sense, they even attack their own self-worth by engaging in adversarial, defensive, frightened sort of activities, where instead of acknowledging, I don't know that, can you tell me? Or that's something I can't do, can you help me? To simply let it be true. But instead, people who feel cornered and they get afraid, and so they lash out and they start hitting or throwing things or whatever, not because they think it will do any good, simply as a way of venting this negative emotion. When instead what they need to do is simply stop and look at that negative emotion, look it right in the eye and figure out what it is, what it wants, what it needs, why it's there, and what is the constructive way to respond to it. You know, that it really isn't a bad thing in and of itself. It may be an opportunity for loss, it may be an experience of loss, but there may be ways to take that loss and flip it on its head and turn it into an opportunity. Thank you very much for watching. I hope my words this last half hour have been helpful to you.